right. I feel very lucky and, of course, honored to be in presence of a true journalist, director of the Electronic Intifada, Ali Abunimah. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
This conversation will be in English, of course. Normally, it's in French. So, to my French audience, I will try to dub it and post it in French this weekend. Cette conversation, elle va être en anglais hein, pour ceux qui nous écoutent, normalement, qui sont habitués au français, mais je vais la reposter avec un doublage en anglais, si possible, ce week-end. Thank you again. So, Ali, 1 year ago, you came to Switzerland. That was in January 2025. And something horrendous happened to you. They basically violently kidnapped you in the street as you were to give a lecture, and they imprisoned you and they deported you. And obviously, all that was absolutely and totally illegal. And you've been in court for that matter. You can maybe give us some detail about that. But my question is, why did you give us the chance to see you again in Switzerland? Because you're back in Zurich and you will give another lecture tomorrow at the Watermelon University, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, well, thank you so much. Well, the reason I'm back is two reasons. One is actually, it's not another lecture, it's my first lecture because, this is the event that we were supposed to hold in January 2025. And my hosts at Watermelon University wanted me to come back, and I wanted to come back to keep my commitment to have the event with them to talk about the very important topic of the ongoing genocide in Gaza. It's our right to do that. It's the right of Swiss people. It's in the Swiss constitution. Forget about my rights. We'll talk about that. But it's the right of Swiss citizens in the constitution. It says that Swiss citizens have the right of freedom of assembly, and they have the right to receive information. So when I was kidnapped and taken to prison to prevent me from speaking to an audience in Switzerland, it was a violation of my rights, but it was also a violation of the rights of Swiss citizens to freedom of assembly and to receive information. So you mentioned that we have been in court since I was arrested and imprisoned in January 2025 for the purpose of stopping me those lectures and speaking about Gaza. We have won series thanks to support I had from people in Switzerland and around the world who made it possible for us to go to court. And thanks also to the amazing work of the legal team here, who I just met with a short time ago. For the first time, we all met together. It was very nice. We've been on the telephone and on email since January 2025, but this is the first time we had a chance to meet. But we won in the Zurich Administrative Court. They declared that the arrest and detention was a violation of the Swiss Constitution and a violation of the European Convention on Human Rights. And we won in the Federal Administrative Court, which ruled that the entry ban and expulsion order that were issued against me were unlawful decisions. And there was no basis for them because I was never a threat to Swiss security, and all of the things that I say are protected by the constitutional right to free speech. So those are really great legal victories, and we are still pursuing some other cases. I won't say a huge amount about them now because they're still in process, and it's not to talk about cases that are, but they have to do with individual accountability, and we're pursuing those cases, and that's part of the reason why I'm in Switzerland. And one case I mentioned today, abuse of office against Nicoletta Della Valle, who was the director of FedPol at the time when I was arrested. And the reason we brought a criminal complaint against her is because the evidence that has emerged in the course of the last year and a half has to do with her role, that she personally intervened in an improper way with apparently a political motive to overturn the original decision of FedPol, because when the Canton of Zurich originally asked for me to be banned from entering Switzerland, FedPol denied that. They said, no, we have no evidence that this person is any type of threat, or he said anything that's not protected by free speech. But then Nicoletta de la Valle intervened personally, and the decision was changed without any new information, without any procedure, without any documentation in the files. And as has already been publicly reported, Nicoletta de la Valle, after she left her position as the director of FedPol, she was immediately given an important job with an Israeli investment company called
Really,
Champion Capital, which is involved in the weapons industry. So I think it's very important for transparency and accountability to know why, who gave the order, who was so determined to prevent me from speaking in Switzerland. I think it's the right of everyone to know that, to stop this kind of abuse happening again. The one thing I'll say, the good news for Swiss people is that apparently the courts work and there is still rule of law in Switzerland. And that's very good news.
yeah, for me too, because I was obviously extremely ashamed about my so-called authority, and not so much surprised, but like quite shocked the way they proceeded also. And maybe we can. I'd like to talk with you about white supremacy, because obviously I was following your case very closely, because I've been following your work, and I follow you because I like what you do, and I don't find so many journalists with the level of bravery, but also competence, that is really doing an amazing job. So then I was talking to friends about your case, a lawyer, and also someone who was working with the police. I think quite honest person, but they did not believe me when I told the story. They did not believe me because they thought Switzerland is a rule of law, Switzerland is this and that. And so they would say, they were telling me, "Well, you probably missed something." But I think part of that is also maybe white supremacy. Like in Switzerland, we cannot be wrong. What we do is law and order. And I know that you've been studying a lot, obviously, these dynamics. And how do you think this white supremacy played out in your case?
Well, let me tell you something about my experience in the Swiss prison, because I was there for 3 days, and I was locked in a cell for 3 days with one other person. And, it was quite a scary experience at first, because I never went through anything like it. And it turned out that he was a young man who was an asylum seeker. And he was there. He had been arrested on some charge of theft or something like that. And we were locked in the cell for 24 hours a day. We weren't allowed to go out for any exercise or anything like that. But the prison, in the cell, you have a window, and the window is on a courtyard. And you see all the other cells. And the prisoners, when they put you in the cell, they give you some paper sheets for the bed. They give you a small toothbrush, and they give you a small bar of soap, like maybe you get in a hotel or something like that. Not a nice bar of soap, just a small bar of soap. And what all of the other prisoners were doing, because they were so bored in the cells, not allowed out at all, is they were writing messages on the windows from the inside to each other and reading them across the courtyard through the window. The window was glass, so that was a good thing. You could see outside to the courtyard. And they were writing just messages about where they're from. And I have to say, I think everybody in the prison, from what I could see, I'm just telling from my perspective, but pretty much everyone in the prison was Arab or African.
Mm.
This was a prison for Arabs and Africans, not by design. I'm sure that other people are taken there, but this is what the system has produced. And all of the prison guards, of course, are Swiss German. This was in Zurich. So you have white Swiss German prison guards presiding over a prison that is full of Africans and Arabs. Now, and I happened to be there as an Arab, although I wasn't typical because all the others were young men and, asylum seekers. Well, when I was speaking to the young man in the cell with me, he was from, I won't give any personal details about him, but he was from a North African background, and he was an asylum seeker. And, we were talking to each other. At a certain point, they came in and they had him in German. It's in Arabic. And the guard was speaking to German and got his legal. He could not understand what this is. Well, can read a little bit of German and we one page of Arabic, and understood that these are the charges that's against him. This is the punishment that the prosecutor is proposing. But as far as I understood, he had no right to a lawyer, like in the United States, no right to a public defender. There was no possibility that he would be able to understand the legal process that he was being subjected to. And I did my best to explain what I could understand, but you have to imagine that he's one of, I don't know how many hundreds of young men in his situation. And you say, well, maybe he did something so terrible that he deserves this. Well, from what I understood, he was accused of some kind of theft. I said, well, I don't want you to tell me any details. Don't tell me if you did it or you didn't do it. I don't want to. But he was talking in a general way. He said, I'm not a thief. And he said, I'm an asylum seeker. And he described his difficult path to end up in Switzerland. And he said, we have to live far outside of Zurich. We have an allowance of 7 francs a day. He said, you can't buy a cup of coffee for 7 francs a day. And he said, we don't want it. We want to work. He said, they need people to work here in Switzerland. And we want to work, but they don't let us work. So a lot of people end up stealing because they need something, they can't afford it and they're not allowed to work. So you can debate this politically, but you have a system with young Arab and African men. You have to have the best system. And I think it is inescapably, all of those people are from countries that were colonies of Europe, that were systematically plundered and destroyed and subjected to various kinds of genocide by European states. I mean, Switzerland wasn't a colonial power, but it's part of the fabric of Western Europe, and those are the people who are coming to Europe, and because their countries were left in a condition where it can't sustain the population, and they continue to extracting. So, from that small, we cut off because the picture is frozen.
I think your connection is not always great.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm in a hotel, so I can't control it, but we're back now. So I was just saying that from my small experience, I had a much bigger picture. I could see a much bigger picture from that cell of a system that perpetuates relations between a superior group of people, let's say, and a subordinate group of people, and I think reinforces the attitudes that you find common. Oh, these people are coming here to steal. These people are coming here to take off. These people are coming here to integrate. They do want to integrate, but if you don't let people walk a dignified life, then they end up in. I hope the connection will be stable.
Yeah, I've heard that sometimes it cuts a little bit, but I think generally should work. If it's not the case, people, please tell us, and it will maybe repeat. But I think overall that was okay. Yeah, if I had the authority, I would apologize for every Swiss citizen, but I don't really. So, on behalf of all the right-minded Swiss citizen, which 15,000 signed a petition, I think, when last year when you were in jail, to request your release. So, in their behalf, sorry from the bottom of our heart for all that you had to go through. This is obviously shameful. I'm very angry against our authority, and I hope this will never happen again. But obviously, that will probably happen again, unfortunately. So now the question is, you're fighting that from USA, right? Can you hear me? Oh,
yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So if you expand the same subject of supremacy to the world, of course, we can see the crisis unfolding. And lately, with the Iran war, like lately there's this memorandum of understanding. So what do you make of this situation? Do you think it can actually balance the imperial force of the USA? Because to me, that's my analysis. There's a bully, that is US with its ally, that is Israel, and European countries, and other corrupt maybe nations. And the only way to me to calm the beast is for them at one point to be beaten, or to find a limit, someone who put them a limit. And for the first time since decades, I think Iran may have showed something that the US imperialist regime wasn't able to see or never witnessed in his last, I don't know, since World War II.
I think I agree with that analysis. And part of the racism of the Western governments or the Western elites, I'm not saying everyone in the West is racist, obviously, but the Western elites and the governments, is they underestimated Iran. And they believe their own start.
I lost you.
I apologize. I've had no problem with the internet in this hotel except now, and it's not my internet. I don't have any control over it, so I really apologize to everyone.
We do that. No, don't worry. We just do the best we can, and if it really doesn't work, I'm sure we will find other occasions. So just keep going.
Yeah, we will.
That will be the way it is, you know.
Yeah, but no, I agree with that. I think they underestimated Iran, and they believe their own propaganda, which is that Iran is a wild and irrational country, and that you know they're primitive, and so that's a significant fact.
Yeah, you said it's what is the significant fact that they've been shown resistance, like true resistance.
To try to share my hotspot, see if that will make the internet better.
A little bit better.
So I'll try it. It's probably will connect for a
Don't worry, the audience is very relaxed. I mean, it's like it's not it's not a problem. We will find a solution. So try to connect to your hotspot to see if it's any better, and we will resume the. Yeah, it's hot here. It's like a heat wave, so I'm sweating. Also, I'm sweating. Also, hoping that we can have a proper connection. On this channel, it's like quite often that. Oh, yeah,
Hello?
you're
Yeah.
back, and it seems to be a little bit more fluid. But let's see what
Is it
it.
better? Okay. Okay. Yeah, this is my hotspot, so maybe it will be better than the internet of the hotel.
Yeah, it seems to be right now. So let's finger crossed, and let's hope that will be fine. So yeah,
Okay.
you were saying that this again the first time
Yeah,
Israel is
that
beating
Iran
resist.
defeated the United States and Israel militarily. And so the memorandum, the agreement between Iran and the United States reflects the reality on the ground, which is that it is not the United States that can dictate the terms of the agreement. It is Iran that dictates the terms. So because the United States is unable to get what it wants through military force. So it has to accept the terms that Iran set. And this is a major historic strategic defeat for the United States. It doesn't mean that the agreement will be smooth or that everything will happen as it's written, but it means that the United States cannot dictate to Iran anymore. And the world now has seen the limit of American military power. So I think it will be seen as a historic turning point.
Yeah, I was surprised because I was expecting maybe that would come from Russia or China, but not Iran, to be honest. Or do we say Iran, not Iran? Iran.
Iran, or yeah, Iran,
Mm.
like in
Yes,
French. Yeah.
exactly. So were you surprised, or like were you aware of this capacity? I mean, Iran is a century-old nation. Uh, so it's even yeah
I
very
wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised, but like everyone, I wasn't sure. You know, I know that Iran has been preparing for this battle for more than 20 years.
mm,
Um, and I know also, if you know some history, you know that from 1980 until 1988, Iran by itself resisted the invasion by Iraq. But it wasn't just by Iraq. The Iraq of Saddam Hussein was backed by all of the West and the Arab Gulf countries who were paying for Iraq to attack Iran just after the revolution. They calculated after the revolution that Iran would be very weak, it would be in disarray. And so they encouraged or they supported Iraq to invade Iran. And by the way, all of the European countries or the big European countries played a major role in that. Germany, France, Britain were the big suppliers of weapons to Iraq, including chemical weapons.
I know.
And Iran resisted for 8 years. An Iran which was quite poor, which had not sophisticated weapons at all, very, very primitive weapons. And they resisted. So an important factor in Iran's victory now is not just, the quality of the weapons and the technology. Of course, all of that is important. It is the popular will and the belief among the population that it is a just and legitimate defense of the country. And all of the calculations which, the Americans had and the Israelis had, which is that all of the propaganda in the West, frankly, is that the Iranian people is oppressed and they are against the regime and they're just waiting for the United States and Israel to attack so they can all come to the street and overthrow the government and welcome the Americans and the Israelis and bring back the Shah or whatever they wanted to do. But actually, Iranians did come to the streets in their millions, day after day, night after night, still until now, to support the country's defense, to support the armed forces, to support the leadership. And now, after the Memorandum of Understanding, we see some Iranians, as maybe not the majority, I don't know, but a significant part of the population, who are against the deal because they are worried that it's too soft, that Iran did not demand enough. So this factor of popular will and popular support is crucial in a country's ability to resist against the world superpower.
So they were stronger also in strategic thinking, and the USA again, they are
They
so
understood the enemy.
idiotic. Mm, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah,
They
yeah,
understand the enemy very well, whereas the enemy believes it's racist stereotypes about Iran.
exactly. We believe our own propaganda, and so we lose. That's the same story in Russia. Actually, we were saying that they were using washing machine uh, component to build their own weapon and this kind of stuff. We believe our own lies, and then we lose all the wars that we create
Start.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We start. It is pathetic, to be honest. And yeah, I hope one day the price will be, of course, too hard to continue the status quo, and that things will change. And I agree with you. I think we are living a historic moment, and I'll see what happened with the following peace process. We'll see. But I wanted to ask you because I had Richard Medast recently. Do you know the journalist?
Yes,
Um,
of course.
yeah, and he's convinced that USA holds all the cards that are calling the shots, and he sees behind a way to have the upper hands on the resources of the world, the energy resources, meaning oil and petrol. And he didn't really see Israel as playing any major role. Do you agree with that? Because this question always comes up: is it Israel who called the shots or USA? And my understanding is that they complete each other because they have common, common interests. But what's your thought on that?
Well, I think my thinking is closer to what you said. But ultimately, of course, the United States does call the shots because the United States is the superpower. And actually, the comments of J.D. Vance, the US vice president in recent days, which shocked Israel and shocked the Israel lobby in the United States, he spoke plain truth when he said that, Israel is basically completely dependent on the United States. And he said two-thirds of the weapons come from the United States. Actually, it's probably more than that, but let's say two-thirds, and they're paid for by the American taxpayer. So this is absolutely the case. Israel is a dependency of the United States. It could not exist without the support of the United States. And what J.D. Vance also said is he said that the United States is the only country supporting Israel today. In a practical sense, that's true. Of course, the Europeans do support Israel very strongly, the European elites and the European governments, but they don't supply the amount of weaponry that Israel needs to wage all these wars against 7 or 8 countries at the same time. That's the United States. So ultimately, what we saw now with why right now Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are criticizing Israel and saying Israel must stop attacking Lebanon and this kind of thing. Why? Because we reached a point where the interests of the United States clash directly with the interests of Israel. Israel wants to continue the war. It wants to continue the ethnic cleansing and the massacres in Lebanon and, of course, in Gaza and the West Bank. And the United States doesn't mind. They don't have a moral objection to massacring people in Lebanon. Did we lose our connection?
Exactly. Just like no, we didn't.
Yeah.
It was lagging.
So
That's all.
yeah, so the US doesn't have a moral objection to that, but now it has a practical objection because Iran is in a position of strength and it's saying to the United States, no deal if you allow Israel to continue massacring people in Lebanon. So the United States is in a position where it has to put pressure on Israel. And we might see that in an unprecedented way. We might see the type of American pressure on Israel we haven't seen before. Because the United States has no choice. Of course, it has political consequences in the United States. There is a strong Israel lobby, but it's still my feeling that when the United States decides that, it's America or Israel, they're going to choose America. They're not going to choose Israel.
What do you think is the real deterrence of Iran? Because Richard was saying that a blocked Hormuz is not a bad thing, because everyone is now going for the American LNG or the American maybe more stable resources. So why is it a problem for America? Because I don't think really the energy from America goes through these areas. So why is it problematic for the USA? I understand the deterrence fact from Iran to the Arab states. That's a problem because they have bases there and interest there. But otherwise, is it so problematic for USA? So
yes,
why?
it is. Well, I don't want to claim I'm an expert on these issues, but like everyone else, I've been educating myself as much as I can in the last few months. It is because the global energy market is a global market. You don't have a separate American market and a separate, Asian market. The prices go up and down together because it's a global commodity. So even if the United States doesn't consume oil that comes through the Strait of Hormuz, the rest of the world does. And now the United States is exporting more oil, for sure. But because they're exporting more oil, the price is going up. And the price is going up in the United States too. So in the United States, the price of gasoline, petrol at the pump, the price of diesel, the price of all of energy products is going up like everywhere else in the world. The US can't escape that unless it was to ban the export of American oil to the rest of the world, or ban the export of American LNG to the rest of the world, to say, okay, so that way we keep it all in the United States, we keep the price low in the United States, and to hell with the rest of the world. Well, that creates a worldwide depression. As Donald Trump himself said, he said the alternative is a worldwide depression. The other thing is, it's not just oil and gas coming out of the Gulf. As we've all learned in the last few months, it's a lot of other very necessary resources, including aluminium, including fertilizer, which is also, nitrate fertilizer, which is a byproduct, and helium, which is also actually not produced. It comes out of the earth. It's a finite supply. Once all the helium is extracted from the earth, then we don't get any more. So, it can't be synthesized. But through the process of drilling for oil, helium is extracted. And that helium, the world is dependent on that. If you go for an MRI, if you go for, all sorts of medical equipment needs helium, other industrial processes. So it's not just oil and gas, but the oil and gas by itself is a problem because it is a global market and the reserves of oil and energy are global. So I don't agree that it's not a problem. If it wasn't a problem for the United States, Donald Trump wouldn't be making the decisions he's making.
Yeah. Do you see this?
And by the way, one thing, because you mentioned
Yeah,
Russia, the idea that American LNG is a more stable supply. First of all, because the Europeans, they stupidly decided to stop the import of Russian gas, or Russia preempted them and said, okay, you want to make war against us and you want to stop us from selling oil, fine, okay, no gas. Well, either way, it amounts to a European decision to stop importing Russian gas. And instead they say, okay, well, what did they want to replace it with, the Europeans? They wanted to replace it with Israeli gas. and American gas. Well, the Israeli gas is a problem because, you know, you can't get, yes, Israel is producing some gas from the Mediterranean, but to get large-scale investment in the infrastructure to supply Europe, you need stability, you need peace, because what's to stop Hezbollah from attacking that infrastructure, or Iran if their energy infrastructure is attacked? They have the ability now to attack gas rigs in the Mediterranean if they want to do it. How is that more stable? It's not. And the American LNG is very expensive. And when you have a country like the United States, which produces a president like Donald Trump that says we want to invade Greenland, or we want, one day he's fighting with the Italian prime minister and the next day with the German chancellor. Can the Europeans really depend on the United States? It's crazy.
Mm. Yeah. Do you think this new position of dominance from Iran will also have an impact on Palestine? Because we know they are traditionally an ally of the resistance of Lebanon, the Hezbollah. And obviously, if they could, they would help the Palestinian with the Yemeni. That's almost the only countries who actually are stepping up for them. But do you think there's going to be a change of the status quo in Palestine?
Yes, well, and the fact is that Iran has been supporting the resistance in Palestine for many, many years, and it's the only country really that has been providing support to armed resistance. And Iran doesn't apologize for that. They say, armed resistance against occupation is a right, and the Palestinians have that right. So they have supported the resistance. Maybe their ability to support the resistance is more limited because, Lebanon is more open. It's not besieged like Gaza. But in principle and practice, they have supported the Palestinian resistance. And that's one of the main reasons why Iran has been a target of the United States and Israel. The bigger question, does Iran's increasing power and stature help the Palestinians? Absolutely. Because I've come to the conclusion that it's impossible for Palestine really to be liberated, actually for all the countries in the region to exercise sovereignty and self-determination, as long as the US imperial power is in the region. And so Israel is totally dependent on American power. And I saw that, I was in Jordan throughout the war where my family lives. And we could see from our roof the missiles going overhead and the interceptors going up. It's quite a spectacular sight, I have to say. And then it was revealed after the war in the American media that the United States used more air defense missiles to protect Israel than Israel used. Most of the air defense effort was American, and those missiles are in very short supply, and they can't be replaced quickly, especially when you take account of the war in Ukraine, where the Western weapons are being consumed very, very quickly. And as you know, we don't have, the West does not have the industrial base to produce them quickly. So any decline in American power in the region means de facto a decline of Israeli power, and that helps the people in the region who are struggling for their liberation, especially the Palestinians. I have no doubt about that.
That's what I hope too. What to say about the power of the Zionist lobby? Like, you've been in Switzerland and you've seen that the Zionist lobby has overreached everywhere, included in Switzerland. I feel like the new generation in USA is less inclined to fall for the propaganda. But what do you see? And also now we're seeing in Latin America, the extreme right are beating the left, and they always are in close tie with Israel as well. So I consider that also to be probably some Zionist influences. Can you tell about the dynamics of these Zionist lobby everywhere in the world?
Yes, it's not just your feeling, though, by the way. There was a recent survey from the Pew Research Center, which is one of these big American think tanks. And they published just last month a survey in 36 countries from around the world. And they found that the support for Israel has totally collapsed, that even in Europe, most of Europe, 75% or more of the population has a very negative view of Israel. And in the United States, that number is now close to 60%, which is unprecedented. I mean, for the last 30 years, there was always a big majority in the United States in support of Israel. So the population as a whole is turning against Israel. Now, when you look at younger people under 34, or, you know, whatever they say, people aged 34 and less, 18 to 34, it's totally one-sided. I mean, 80%, 90% have negative views of Israel, and the number who have a positive view is becoming minuscule. So the thing to understand about the Israel lobby is it functions among elites. It's very influential and powerful among elites, and it's losing any influence among the broader population. And it's becoming quite desperate. So, you know, when you see actions, even like what happened in Switzerland, we don't know exactly who picked up the phone and called who, but we do know that pro-Israel groups and pro-Israel politicians and pro-Israel officials were involved. But they are acting at an elite level. They're acting at the level of where power lives. They're not influential with the population. And so what that means is they're becoming, in some ways, more aggressive because they feel that their power and influence is slipping. And the word you used is overreaching. I think that's very true. And even in the United States, they're overreaching because, I mean, I think you must know who Professor John Mearsheimer is. You know, he's very influential. I had him as a professor many years ago in the University of Chicago. He's a very, very intelligent man, and he's not he's quite critical of Israel. He's quite courageous in that sense. But he said something the other day. He said, if the Israelis were smart, they would not be challenging the U.S.-Iran agreement, because they would understand that this agreement is very vital to the United States. And so by challenging it and by mobilizing their lobby to challenge it in the United States, and definitely they can disrupt the agreement, or they can delay it, or they can do all kinds of sabotage. But ultimately, they're going to overreach, because this agreement is so fundamental and critical to the United States. If it wasn't, Donald Trump wouldn't have signed it. He wouldn't have signed such an agreement that made so many concessions unless he had no choice. So I think they are overreaching, but there is still a lot of accumulated power, institutional power. You still have people in the media, in politics, in government, who still operate according to this pro-Israel consensus, even though the population is in a very different place. And my impression in many countries is that's true on a lot of issues, not just when it comes to Palestine, that there is in the West, a very big disconnect between the elite level and the population. And that is manifesting in a loss of trust in traditional institutions, in some ways a crisis, a crisis of legitimacy for the whole system. The genocide in Gaza accelerated that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now people have to know. Like, we could pretend before that we didn't really know, but now we cannot pretend that anymore. I'm waiting for this to manifest in the real transfer of power, because I only see these leaders who are so supportive of Israel. You can see the double standard all the time. Israel has the right to defend itself, but no one else has this right. And but it's so obvious now that the line is hard to keep on. When they debate one another, it's like it's too easy to defeat now for any opponent. But like in Europe, we didn't see yet that to transform in a real politic transfer of power. While in USA, we've seen a little bit with, for instance, Mamdani and others. I'm not sure it's enough to actually do anything, but to warn Israel that they are overreaching and maybe they should rethink the strategy. And they know what they have to do, but they think they have to do more propaganda. And I don't think there's room for more propaganda because they already reached the peak.
Well, it's even worse than that. I mean, yes, they think they have to do more propaganda, and they actually quadrupled their propaganda budget this year. So they went from about $150 million to about, actually more than quadrupled. They went to more than $700 million. And, they keep thinking that this is going to do the trick. But the problem is not that they didn't do enough propaganda. The problem is that people saw the genocide on their telephones every day. They saw parents carrying the pieces of the bodies of their children in plastic shopping bags day after day. How many times did we see children torn apart, children crying for their parents, parents crying for their children? And it's impossible to erase that. And actually, I think the propaganda at this point is counterproductive because it just highlights the gap between the reality that people know and the fiction that Israel is trying to promote, that it's the kind of Eurovision fiction that Israel is a fun country where they love gay rights and they love women's rights and they're just like us, and people don't buy it anymore.
Absolutely not. So you created the Electronic Intifada decades ago, and now Intifada, remind me, means resistance or uprising or
uprising.
Yeah, an uprising. If I'm not wrong. So the question now is opening to what is the resistance has to do to carry on the fight, to push back these lunatics and these horrible supremacists, imperialists and capitalists, crooks. Did you hear my question? Because you froze a little bit, so I'm not sure you heard.
Yeah, no, I think I heard it. Yeah, I just want to say, Intifada means uprising. Of course, the Zionists tried to equate it with terror or anti-Semitism, and it doesn't mean that at all. It's popular sovereignty, it's solidarity, and we called it Electronic Intifada. We started it 25 years ago, believe it or not. At the beginning of the internet, when the internet gave us for the first time the ability to have a media which is not, we don't have to own a TV station, we don't have to own a big printing press and a newspaper. Just people like us can do their own media, as you're doing, as we're all doing now. And so it was an electronic intifada, meaning an information uprising, that we are rising up against the propaganda, against the legacy media, the big media, which didn't give us any space or any voice. And that's the connotation. I just want to make that clear. I mean, in terms of the resistance, of course, you can be criminalized for saying this in some parts of Europe, but all of the European countries, by the way, that were occupied during World War II are very proud of their resistance. They're not proud of the collaborators, even though actually there were more collaborators than there were people in the resistance. But we only hear about the heroes of the resistance. Nobody tells us about the collaborators. So, but the point is that resistance is okay if you're French, if you're Dutch, or if you're, whatever, but it becomes criminal if you're South African. The ANC was criminalized in the West. It's criminal and terrorist if you're Algerian. It's criminal and terrorist. if you're Palestinian. And I think people understand that this is no longer the case. That this propaganda isn't working anymore. Palestinians have a right to resist occupation, that Lebanon has a right to resist occupation, and that Iran has a right to defend itself. These are facts. I don't know if I'm breaking any laws here. I don't think I am, but I wouldn't change what they say anyway, because I can't change the fact that this is correct and I believe it.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean I'm not supporting attacks on unarmed people or on civilians, it's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a people has a right to resist a military occupation, has a right to resist a colonial aggression. How could that even be controversial?
exactly. It's as simple as that. And I would go further. I don't think Israel has the right to defend itself, since it is the aggressor, it is the colonizer, it is the genocider. So I'm not saying.
But look,
On what border should Israel defend itself? They don't even know.
Exactly. In every country, in most legal systems, there is a law, that if you kill somebody, that's murder, homicide, could be murder, it could be manslaughter, unless you can prove that it was an act of self-defense. This is true in most countries. In most countries, the law says that you cannot claim self-defense if the act that you are defending yourself against was caused by you. Then it's not self-defense. So if I attack you and then you hit me and then I hit you another time, I can't claim that I was defending myself against you because I started the aggression. This is the law in every country. It's common sense. We all understand it. So you're exactly right. How is Israel defending itself when it's occupying Lebanon, occupying Palestine, occupying much of Syria? It's attacking Yemen. It's launching wars of aggression against Iran. This is not self-defense. This is the supreme number one crime of aggression. It is the others who have the right to defend themselves.
Yeah, and I hope people will now start to be daring to say it, because I think people know and understand it deeply. But it's another thing to say it, and that's where I think Electronic Intifada, and particularly you, were brave and courageous to say that earlier than we actually could. Now it's a little bit easier to say it, but like some years ago, if you would say that, you would be erased. And there's many cases, even in France, of people who are a comedian who were just cut off from the public, having a lot of problems because they dare to make joke along these lines. So my hope also is that now it's a more common sense thing that people dare to say. And thank you for the one who were first in line, such as you, to recognize that. Absolutely, yeah. So how to follow up on the resistance? What is it to be done? I mean, we understand that the armed resistance in Palestine, in Lebanon, and in the neighborhood country there needs to get stronger. But when you talk about Europe, what weight can we add on for this same resistance? Because I understood long time ago that the Palestinian struggle is at the heart of the humanity struggle. And I feel, even though I'm Swiss, I was in Egypt for the march for Palestine last year. But it's clear to me that if we lose there, we lose everywhere. So I'm asking you, you came to Switzerland, what is there that we can do as European, even if Switzerland is not European, but geographically, we are in the middle of Europe. So yeah, what do you think?
Well, I think everyone has a role. I think the boycott, divestment, and sanctions is the way for people around the world to materialize their support. Yes, there's a lot of intellectual support, emotional support, but we have to turn it into practical support, into changing the power dynamics. And that's where I think the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement offers people a way in. You know, almost every institution in the West is complicit with Israel and with the genocide, certainly across the European Union. The European Union provides a huge amount of funding. But, you know, even in Switzerland, I mean, the universities, corporations, there's all sorts of institutions in Switzerland that are tied to Israel's system of apartheid and genocide. So, you know, I don't know enough about that in Switzerland, but in the United States, we've been having recently a lot of victories with divestment, including state divestment. You know, where I give you an example: the states, which are like the cantons in Switzerland, for example, Michigan recently, and also Illinois, they have their public employees' pension funds invested in Israel bonds and in certain corporations that are involved in the genocide. And through popular campaigns, they succeeded in forcing the state of Michigan and the state of Illinois, which is where I live in Chicago, to divest millions of dollars from Israel bonds and some corporations. But you have to understand that even though governments are supposed to be transparent about where they're investing the money, they're not always transparent. And so people did a lot of research using freedom of information requests and so on to find out where the money is invested, who's responsible, and so on. But through those campaigns, and sometimes they campaigned for more than a year, they succeeded. So, you know, some of these campaigns take time, it's long term, but this is something university students and others can do in terms of finding out how their institutions are involved and demanding an end to it. Remember how you know, at the beginning of the war in you know, this phase of the war in Ukraine in February 2022, how institutions across Europe, nobody asked them. They also were all boycotting Russia, you know, even to the point where
in no time.
Yeah.
2 weeks and they were boycotting FIFA, put a ban on Russia. The Eurovision, they banned Russia. Within 2 weeks, everyone was boycotting Russia.
And there was no popular demand for it. It wasn't a popular campaign. It was a top-down campaign. But so the point of that, of course, yes, it's hypocritical, but it means that the elites, they don't think that boycott is immoral or unethical. They accept its legitimacy as a tactic. It's just that they don't want to boycott Israel. But it's important to say that. They can't say, oh, well, boycott is legitimate in one situation, but it's illegitimate. You know, with Israel, they say, oh, if you say, well, we have to boycott Israeli universities because they're involved directly in the genocide, you know, with military research. Some of them are built on land stolen from Palestinians and so on. They say, oh, no. But academia, it's sacred. Intellectual ties, it's sacred. And we have to keep this aside from politics. Well, you can't say that and then at the same time say we're cutting off all research links with every Russian university. Now, Ursula von der Leyen the other day, the head of the European Commission, she said we want to ban entry to Europe for any ex-combatant in the Russian army. Anyone who served in the Russian army should be banned from getting a visa to the European Union. Okay, well, that's you're right. But you have how many European citizens with dual nationality who are going to participate in the genocide in Gaza? You have how many Israelis, even if they're not European citizens, who go and kill children in Gaza and then they want to come on vacation in the European Union? And if you say, well, this is wrong, we should investigate these people as potential war criminals, all of a sudden, oh, well, this is discrimination. You can't have it both ways. You have to have one standard.
They had it both ways for forever. So, but now they can't anymore.
Our job is to make that impossible.
And yeah,
And I
not
think
sustainable.
people in Europe have a big role to play in that, because the pillar and the foundation of Zionism and of the Israeli colonial project is Europe and North America. It's the West.
Absolutely, that's the base, obviously. What's the state of the genocide? It's slower, but like since the so-called ceasefire, which is not a ceasefire, there were more than 1,000 killed civilians over there. And my friend in Palestine, they hate when I say that because they don't like to be numbers. So sorry, Muhammad, and sorry. But I've heard that now some people are daring to say that there were 600,000 killed. Do you have a bit of an assessment of the situation that is going on now? Because with Iran, we tend to forget we cannot follow so many crises and war in the same times. So unfortunately, the pressure and all the lights that were for Gaza has been turned, and I'm afraid now the genocide is starting, or it never finished, but they're losing again because we tend to forget.
It's such an important point, and we can't forget. We have to keep talking about Gaza. We have to keep demonstrating. We have to keep speaking about it in every way we can, because genocide didn't stop. And the Israelis did something very clever with this so-called ceasefire, because they succeeded in removing Gaza from the front of people's consciences. But they're still killing people every day. They're still causing severe suffering in terms of the fact that none of the commitments to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza were in the ceasefire agreement. None of that has been respected. So the amount of food, the amount of medicine, the amount of other essential supplies that are coming in is still a fraction of what's necessary. Yes, there is some more food, but it's still not enough. And people and most of what's coming in is not in the form of humanitarian aid. It's coming in as commercial goods, which means that you have to have money to buy it. You can go to a market in Gaza and find food, but you don't have a job, you don't have an income. How can you buy it? Only a few people are in the position to buy it. So, and the medical situation is a catastrophe. Still, people, leave aside the people injured in the genocide, but the lack of clean water, the lack of sanitation means that people are chronically sick. You have diseases, you have rats everywhere. This is something that Gaza is being overrun by rats. I mean, this is a concentration camp. If we heard this story from the 1940s, we would recognize it as a concentration camp where people can't sleep at night in their tents because rats are running around everywhere, biting them and terrifying them and carrying diseases. And it's not in the headlines. And Israel is deliberately continuing this genocide. It's still demolishing houses behind the so-called yellow line, which it keeps expanding the area of direct control. And the genocide hasn't stopped. It's continuing, and it's really a catastrophe that we have to keep talking about. In terms of the numbers, what I can say is that the health ministry in Gaza is very careful. So the number they give now of dead people is 73,000. That doesn't mean that that's the number that was killed in total. It means that's the number of deaths which are documented. Okay? Documented from direct acts of violence, bombing, shooting, a building falling, and people being buried underneath. There's definitely thousands more, many, many thousands more who've not been found. But that number doesn't include all the people who are dying from illness, the older people who are dying 5, 10 years before they would die because they can't treat their blood pressure, because they can't treat their diabetes, they can't treat cancer. So you have a huge number of excess deaths that wouldn't otherwise happen, that are not necessarily the direct result of bombing, but the result of all these other consequences. And that number could easily be in hundreds of thousands. I'm not an expert on that. There are people who do make such studies and estimates, and some of those credible estimates are in the hundreds of thousands. And that's not, it would be surprising to me if the number is not like that, given the conditions that exist today in Gaza.
Same for me. So I think we really underestimate the pain and suffering of the Palestinian, and I hope we will soon be in measure of focusing again there. And let's see what happened with this peace in Iran. Let's finger crossed. Thank you so very much, Ali Abunimah. You said you had another appointment just after, so I'm not going to keep you for too long, hoping that is not the last time we talk to one another.
Thank you. I would like to do it again, and I appreciate your audience very much, and I appreciate what you're doing to educate them and to think more broadly about these global issues. So I'll be happy to do it again when I'm back in the United States, or next time when I'm back in Switzerland. So it would be my pleasure.
Can you give us the time and the place where you're going to give a lecture tomorrow, so to make sure that the people that are around Zurich tomorrow, the 23rd of June, don't miss you?
Yes, let me find it to make sure I give the correct information.
Yes,
One
please.
moment, because I have a link to it.
I think there's a good amount of resistant people or friends
Yes.
with Palestine and the resistance front in Zurich. So that would be a pity if they missed that.
Yes, I hope they'll come. I'm just opening the link. It's a bit slow because I'm on my hotspot, but it's hosted by Watermelon University, and it's on Tuesday, June 23rd. So that's tomorrow, and it is, here we go, in
I have it here in case. It's in 6:30, starting 6:30. It's written in Zurich, but I don't.
It's in
large because Zurich.
Müllerstraße, Müllerstraße 64, and it's above restaurant Vegeletaria. So Müllerstraße 64, above restaurant Vegeletaria, Tuesday, 23rd of June at 6:30 in the evening.
Good. I hope you have the most people you can welcome in this venue. I also hope that the media in Switzerland will stop being shy and interview you and show and shed the light on the really sham behavior we had as an authority last year, and that your case will never happen again. Thank you so much, Ali Abunimah, for coming back to Switzerland, for the work you're doing. You're really a true source of inspiration for me and for many others. So take care, keep going.
Thank you. You too.
And see you next time.
All right.
Bye-bye. Stay with me in a second, and bye-bye, everyone.